This is the interview in relation to Animal Farm themes, and I'm interviewing my mum. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Alicia's mum, Ita, and I'm going to attempt to answer some questions about Animal Farm and the themes that come out in this play.
Lovely. All right, first question. Do you think propaganda is more or less effective in modern day than in the past? And why, do you think?
So I think propaganda in some senses is more effective because it can impact through social media. It can be transmitted, or people can be made aware of it more easily and quickly, and more effectively as well, because of the way social media works and because of the way people now consume information in almost in a very kind of a thin soundbite kind of way, without really considering the veracity of it, or the context, or the and challenging it in any way. So from that respect, I think it is probably more effective than in the past. However, I think there are some very clear examples in the past of very effective propaganda, and the obvious one that springs to mind is obviously Nazism in the 20th century, which was prosecuted extremely effectively in Germany, and led, as we know, to the last World War.
Yeah, and that actually brings me perfectly on to my next question, is that, do you remember any obvious examples of propaganda from when you were growing up?
Yeah, so I guess the one that I think about is when I was growing up in Ireland in the 70s and 80s. And at that time, the troubles in the north of Ireland were in full swing, and so the war against the British for freedom for the north of Ireland was being fought by the IRA. And one of the campaigns that sticks in my memory is the hunger strikes that political prisoners went on hunger strike, basically to publicize the cause and the war and the fight for freedom that they were prosecuting against the British. And yeah, that's probably one of the most striking ones from my that I have sort of personal experience of at that time.
Okay, next question is kind of quite to do with Animal Farm. So the animals in the story, their revolution begins with this ideal of them being completely equal to each other. Have you ever experienced or witnessed any parallels where a promise of equality turned out differently to how it was expected?
Have I ever experienced that?
Or witnessed?
Or witnessed it. So I would have to say, as much as women in Western societies are considered, and we consider ourselves to be equal to men, and there's lots of legislation that has been passed over maybe certainly the last 50 years or so, which has enshrined in law that we are equal. There is, there are clear instances of where women are still, for all that, not actually treated equally in reality. So the main one is in terms of being paid the same to do a similar job as a man. Women are typically paid less to do the exact same job, They don't tend to have the same opportunities for career progression that men will be afforded. Despite the fact that at this stage, I think, women are in the majority in an awful lot of professions. They're certainly in the majority now in a lot of, university courses. And I think it's actually a serious sort of social problem that young boys and young men are not, educating themselves to the same as much and as successfully as women. But for all of that, women are still treated unequally. So that's kind of an example.
Yeah. Some of the animals continue to defend Napoleon, even as his actions betray their own values, and he gives in to his hunger for power in the story. Why do you think people sometimes tend to ignore warning signs or uncomfortable truths about their leaders?
So I think that, particularly with a cause like this, that people become very wedded to and give an awful lot of their time, their energy, their emotional and physical energy to. And even though it becomes apparent that that individual is either not delivering on what they said or is not true to what they said, it is very, very difficult to admit that that's the case, and you're basically giving up not just on them, but you're giving up on yourself as well, and you're giving up on ideals that you have held very, very dear. And I think it's more that stops people from giving up on the actual individual rather than it's the ideal, and it's the loss of that ideal.
Yeah. So
it's also, I think, maybe a little bit of being afraid of what happens if you do that.
Right.
Where does it leave you? Because if that's the kind of power structure, and as bad as it is, or as untrue as it is, you have a place within it. You have a rank. You have a you've got recognition as being part of that. If you pull yourself away from that, what are you left with?
Yeah.
You're on your own. That's quite scary and quite hard to do.
Leading on from that, have you ever experienced the disillusionment of your belief system becoming something that you can rely on anymore and having to face that?
I think I probably haven't experienced this, but I have seen it be experienced by my mother.
Right.
So, very much kind of strong believer in the Catholic Church, which I am as well. And growing up with a belief that if you prayed hard enough and you were observant and religious and basically you played by all the rules and you abided by all the rules, that God is there to help you when you need it. And so through my father's illness and subsequent death, watching my mother become disillusioned with the fact that she had believed in that all her life and had given her so much of herself to it that she couldn't then rely on it in her hour of need, it was very, very hard to watch. But at the same time, again, not being able to kind of, I suppose, give up on it completely.
Yeah.
Again, because it's something you hold so dear and is so much part of you, that you can't give up on it, but it has been weakened immeasurably. I think the other example of it, again, for her generation, was all of the scandals in the Catholic Church, and again, sort of feeling totally betrayed by all these men telling us for so long how to live our lives, and how it turned out they were actually living theirs. And to see to see that kind of, and to realize that was actually true.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
Thank you for participating in this interview.
That's okay. That's no problem.
Very interesting answers.